When my brother told me at Mom's while reading that women shouldn't inherit businesses, and the whole family erupted in laughter. None of them expected the lawyer to announce that our mother's multi-million-dollar empire was entirely mine. And watching my misogynistic brother's face crumble was worth every second of humiliation I'd endured. I'm Jennifer, and 4 months ago I thought I was the black sheep of the Rodriguez family. My mother, Maria Rodriguez, had built an investment empire from absolutely nothing. Real estate holdings across Texas, a successful property management company, and a portfolio worth over $3 million. She was a single mom who'd raised my brother Carlos and me after Dad left when I was 8, and she'd worked 16-hour days to give us everything we needed. Carlos was 2 years older and had always been Mom's golden boy on the surface. 6 feet tall, charming smile, the kind of guy who could sell ice to polar bears. He lived in Dallas working in finance, drove a BMW he couldn't really afford, and had this way of making everyone think he was more successful than he actually was. I was the quiet one who stayed in Houston, worked as a financial analyst, and spent my weekends helping Mom review investment properties and analyze market trends. The difference between Carlos and me wasn't just personality, it was philosophy. Carlos saw Mom's success as something he was entitled to inherit simply because he was the son. He'd make jokes about women being too emotional for business, about how men were natural leaders. "Good thing Mom had me to carry on the family name and legacy," he'd say during family dinners, while I bit my tongue and focused on my plate. Mom died suddenly in March from complications after what should have been routine surgery. No warning, no time for goodbyes. One day we were discussing a potential apartment complex purchase, and the next day I was planning her funeral while Carlos flew in from Dallas playing the devastated son for all our relatives. The will reading was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at the offices of Patterson and Associates in downtown Houston. The whole extended family showed up: Carlos, me, my Aunt Rosa, Uncle Miguel, and several cousins who barely knew Mom but suddenly cared deeply about her legacy. The office smelled like leather and old books, with these heavy mahogany chairs that made everyone sit up straighter. Carlos strutted in wearing his most expensive suit, already acting like he was the CEO of something. He'd spent the week since Mom's funeral making calls to her business contacts, introducing himself as her successor. "Time to modernize Mom's old-fashioned approach," he'd told me the night before. "Turn this into a real business instead of her little hobby." Mr. Patterson, Mom's attorney, was this distinguished man in his 70s who'd handled her legal affairs for 15 years. He opened the folder containing Mom's will and began reading through the standard legal language. Then he got to the specific bequests. "To my daughter Jennifer, I leave my personal jewelry, my art collection, and all items of sentimental value." Carlos actually chuckled. "The toys," he whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Mom's leaving Jenny the toys and trinkets." Several cousins smiled, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Mr. Patterson continued. "To my son Carlos, I leave the family home at 1247 Oak Ridge Drive, my personal vehicles, and all household furnishings." Carlos leaned back in his chair with this satisfied grin, nodding like he was accepting an award. "That's more like it," he murmured. Aunt Rosa reached over and patted his arm approvingly. I was devastated. All those years working alongside Mom, learning about investments, helping her build her empire, and I got jewelry while Carlos got real estate. It felt like the ultimate betrayal, like Mom had bought into the same sexist ideas that Carlos always spouted. But wait, it gets worse. Carlos decided this was the perfect moment to make a speech. He stood up, smoothed his tie, and looked around the room like he was addressing shareholders. "You know," he said, his voice dripping with false modesty, I want everyone to understand that Jenny getting the sentimental items makes perfect sense. Women are naturally more emotional, more attached to keepsakes and memories. But business, that requires logical thinking, strategic planning, the kind of natural leadership skills that, let's be honest, men are just better equipped for. The room went completely silent. Even Uncle Miguel, who'd never been accused of being progressive, looked uncomfortable. Carlos kept going. I mean, no offense to Jenny, but women just aren't built for the cutthroat world of business and investments. They're too soft, too trusting. Mom knew that, which is why she's leaving the real assets to someone who can actually handle them. Then he looked directly at me with this patronizing smile. Really, Jenny, you should be grateful you're getting anything at all. Most successful businesswomen don't leave their daughters inheritances. They leave everything to the sons who can actually preserve and grow the family wealth. I felt like I'd been slapped. The humiliation was overwhelming. Several family members were nodding along with his speech, like he was speaking some uncomfortable truth. Aunt Rosa was actually smiling. That's when Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and continued reading. Regarding Rodriguez Investment Holdings, all shares, assets, properties, and operational control pass to. Carlos straightened up, already planning his acceptance speech and probably mentally spending the money. Jennifer Maria Rodriguez. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on that thick carpet. Carlos's confident expression morphed through confusion, disbelief, and then this slow-dawning horror as he realized what had just happened. I'm sorry, what? Carlos shot up from his chair so fast he knocked over his water glass. There has to be some mistake. Mom wouldn't, she couldn't. Mr. Patterson adjusted his reading glasses and looked directly at Carlos. There's no mistake, son. Your mother was very specific. Jennifer inherits 100% ownership of Rodriguez Investment Holdings, including all current properties, the management company, and investment accounts totaling approximately $3.2 million. That's when I lost it. I started laughing. Not just giggling, full-on, doubled over, tears streaming down my face laughing, because the irony was just too perfect. Carlos had just given this whole speech about women being too emotional and weak for business, and Mom had left me literally everything that mattered. You think this is funny? Carlos was practically shouting now. This is insane. Jenny doesn't know the first thing about running a business. She's just been Mom's little assistant. Filing papers and making coffee. I wiped the tears from my eyes and looked at him with new confidence. Carlos, honey, who do you think has been analyzing the property acquisitions for the last 5 years? Who's been reviewing the financial statements and market reports? Who's been building relationships with our tenants and contractors? His face was getting redder by the second. Mom did all that. You were just what? Just the daughter who actually cared enough to learn the business instead of assuming I'd inherit it by default. Mr. Patterson pulled out another document. Actually, Jennifer, your mother asked me to read this letter if there were any questions about her decision. He began reading Mom's words, and I could practically hear her voice. Carlos, if you're hearing this, it means you're upset about not inheriting the business. Mijo, I love you, but you've never shown real interest in what I built here. You see my work as something you'll tolerate until you can cash out and move on to something more prestigious. You've also made it clear many times that you believe women are inferior in business. Well, let me tell you something. The woman you've been dismissing as too emotional has been running this company's day-to-day operations for 3 years. Jennifer is the future of Rodriguez Investment Holdings because she earned it, not because she was born into it. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of Carlos's heavy breathing. But Mom wasn't done. Mr. Patterson continued. Carlos, You get the house and cars because those are things you value, status symbols that make you feel important. But my business goes to the child who understands that wealth isn't about showing off. It's about building something lasting. Jennifer has proven herself worthy of this responsibility. I pray that someday you'll understand why I made this choice. Carlos slumped back into his chair like he'd been physically deflated. The family members who'd been nodding along with his sexist speech suddenly found their shoes very interesting. But the beautiful justice was just beginning. Over the next few weeks, as Carlos tried to figure out how to challenge the will, he discovered just how thoroughly Mom had planned this transition. All the key business relationships were built around me, not him. Our biggest property management contracts were in my name as the designated successor. When Carlos tried to call our major clients and introduce himself as the rightful heir, they told him they'd already confirmed their contracts with me personally. Even better, the house Carlos inherited came with a massive mortgage that Mom had refinanced just 6 months before she died. Without the business income to support those payments, Carlos had to get a real job for the first time in years. His BMW got repossessed. His fancy Dallas apartment became unaffordable. Meanwhile, I discovered that Mom had been preparing me for this inheritance far longer than I'd realized. She'd structured the business so that all the profitable properties were debt-free. The management contracts were locked in for years, and there was even a detailed succession plan for key employees who'd been wondering about the company's future. Carlos tried one last desperate move. He showed up at my office 3 weeks after the will reading, hat in hand, asking if there might be a position for him in the family business. "Look, Jenny," he said, sitting across from my desk in what used to be Mom's office. "I know I said some things I shouldn't have, but we're family. Surely there's room for your brother in the company." I looked up from the investment report I was reviewing, a potential strip mall acquisition that would add another $250,000 to our annual revenue. "There is a position available," I said calmly. "We need an assistant property manager. Entry level, $38,000 a year, requires nights and weekend work showing apartments and handling maintenance calls. You interested?" The look on his face was priceless. His male ego couldn't handle the idea of working for his emotional little sister at an entry-level position. Carlos moved back to Dallas, had to sell Mom's house to cover his debts, and last I heard he was working for a mid-level investment firm, making a fraction of what he used to claim he earned. Meanwhile, Rodriguez Investment Holdings is thriving under my leadership. I've expanded our portfolio, improved our property management systems, and built relationships with new contractors who respect my vision for sustainable, profitable growth. We're on track to hit $4 million in total assets by next year. The family members who laughed along with Carlos's sexist speech have completely changed their tune. Suddenly, Aunt Rosa wants to have lunch and discuss potential investment opportunities. Cousins who used to dismiss me as the quiet one now ask my advice about their own financial decisions. I kept Mom's jewelry, and I wear her favorite pieces to every board meeting and property inspection. Not because they're toys or trinkets, but because they remind me that she saw my worth when others couldn't. Carlos learned the hardest lesson of all, that inheritance isn't about gender or birth order or family hierarchy. It's about who's actually prepared to carry on a legacy, who has the knowledge and dedication to build something instead of just cashing it out. Mom's will wasn't about punishing Carlos or rewarding me. It was about protecting something she'd spent her life building by putting it in the hands of someone who valued it as much as she did. Someone who saw it as a responsibility, not just a payday. The golden boy facade only works until reality shows up with legal documents that prove what everyone should have already known. Competence has nothing to do with what's between your legs and everything to do with what's between your ears. Here's what I learned from this experience. First, never let anyone's prejudices make you doubt your own capabilities. Your track record speaks louder than their assumptions. Second, real leadership is proven through actions over years, not claimed through accidents of biology. Third, the best revenge against sexism is just being undeniably successful while staying true to your values. Mom's legacy lives on not because she had a son to carry the family name, but because she had a daughter willing to carry the family work ethic. If you've ever been told you're not cut out for something because of your gender, race, or background, drop a worthy in the comments and share your story. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe now.